So I think we'll get started. Thank you everyone for joining in this very special event. I know Dr. Acehan, from we actually met. I would say like I think it was last year.
Last year, yeah.
This year has gone. It feels like the longest year of my life.
Exactly.
But just a little bit about how I know Dr. Acehan. The place I used to work at, the Turkish Coalition of America, which so I should say that they have met with Lincoln. Actually, their orientation event was with Lincoln, their first event. So they kind of got an idea of like at least Turkish American grassroots organizations and grassroots activism. The idea of this whole, I should say, the program is about cross-cultural understanding. And we are trying to, it's similar to our youth Congress that you went to for, but instead of college students, we're, focusing on high school students here. I just want to give you a list of kind of organizations that they have been a part of, events that they've done before. They've done the civics and grassroots engagement. They learned about study abroad programs, civil society and conflict management, the power of media. So they had a event with the Turkish American TV. And then they spoke to Sinan Ertay, the deputy chief of mission at the Turkish embassy. And so now you're their fifth event.
Wow.
So they've had a great program so far, and they're going to go until December. But like I said, I know Dr. Acehan, she had presented at the Turkish Coalition of America back with the Youth Congress we had in 2019, but she also was at the Assembly of Turkish American Associations 40th conference with this presentation. And I think it's a much more historical event than I know you guys have been getting to, but I think would be fascinating just to see this kind of history. And just a little bit about Dr. Acehan. She is a visiting scholar at George Mason University at the moment, at the Ali Burak Ak Center for Global Islamic Studies. She completed her PhD in history at Bilkent University in Ankara, Turkey. And as you'll see, her major research interests include early Turkish immigration, I should say, in the U.S., Ottoman migration, because you have to make that distinction when it comes to early Turkish immigration, and from the 1890s to the 1930s, transnationalism and U.S. Ottoman relations. She has served as a postdoctoral researcher at John the 28th Foundation for Religious Studies in Bologna, Italy, and a resident fellow at various universities and institutions, including Harvard University, the Smithsonian Institution for National Museum of American History, and the Free University of Berlin. And so without further ado, I'd like to hand it off to you, Isil, for the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the nice introduction, Cenk. And hello, everybody. I hope, I will give you an introduction about the history of Turks in the US, because I know that many of you are, coming from Turkish ancestors, I guess, right? Turkish parents. So maybe we thought that it will be nice for you to listen to the history of the Turkish immigrants in US, which goes back for over 100 years. So we are not new in here. Actually, Turkish immigrants started coming in here like at the beginning of the 20th century, like 1900s. And many of them came from Anatolia to work. That the United States is built by immigrants, actually. So immigration history is a very important part of US history also. So that's why I think, we should learn much more about the immigrants who made America and who contributed to the America, although they are forgotten right now. So I will like to start my presentation with maybe explaining the pictures on the PowerPoint. So the first picture is the picture of the Turkish leather workers who migrated to the United States in like 1910s. And they migrated actually because there was a big leather industry in Massachusetts at that time. So like, for example, Peabody, Massachusetts was the leather capital of the world at that time, and they needed workforce to work in the leather industry. So like the neighboring towns of these little, American towns were also producing shoes and leather goods like belts. So many of these towns around Boston area, their industry, their economy was heavily based on the industry, on the leather industry. So that actually triggered the story of Turkish immigration in here in the United States. And the other picture, actually, there were like two types of immigrants at that time. One was those who came for leather industry and shoe industry and automotive, like working in the Ford factory in Michigan, in Detroit, for example. They came here. And the other groups of immigrants, Turkish immigrants, were in here to study, like we are doing right now. So there were like 15 Ottoman citizen students at Columbia University, and many of them were sent here to New York on the scholarship that they got from the Ottoman government at that time, like in 1910. So this picture is from 1912. These were the students who were studying at Columbia and who were getting their PhD degrees at Columbia University. And after, actually, today is the 82nd anniversary of the passing away of Atatürk, the founder of the Turkish Republic. So these guys actually returned to Turkey after the foundation of the Republic, and they contributed a lot to our country, to Turkey. So it was a very successful endeavor. I don't know if you have heard about the immigration stories to here. We know, for example, from the movies, like Hollywood movies, for example, like Italian immigrants who came to New York. Many of them are, described as being like mafia, like the Godfather, like in the Godfather movie, for example. So actually, Turkish immigrants came to at exactly the same time when Italians, Polish immigrants came here, and all these, Eastern European immigrants started entering the country. So it was Turkish immigrants were a part of this immigration story. So when you go to, for example, maybe some of you have visited Ellis Island, and you can see people coming to the shores of New York and seeing Lady Liberty and entering from Ellis Island, because it was the immigration processing station at that time. And among these people were the Ottoman, Turkish, Armenian, Greek, Jewish, Sephardic Jewish people who migrated to the United States in order to find jobs and in order to find a better life and work in here and make money. And perhaps they also dreamed of going back to their home country one time when they were secure and they were sure that they had made a lot of money. So this is for example, this is a story of an immigrant, and he was telling about his story to about coming to the United States. He was saying, I was 20 years of age, strong, even powerful. In the view of some of my friends, I longed for work, but there was none in Turkey. We were all desperate. Today in Turkey would be very difficult to understand. Now, most of us are wealthy by the living standards in 1912. At our most desperate hour, we heard that there was a country called America where jobs were abundant, workers were needed since the country was underpopulated. So this triggered a lot of, finding jobs. The prospect of finding jobs triggered a lot of migration to the United States from Anatolia, from Turkey. Maybe I should tell you about the American missionaries who started working in Turkey at the time, like 1850s. They started building American missions, mostly in like cities like Istanbul or Harput in Eastern Anatolia, which had a large Armenian population, because these American missionaries were trying to like convert people to Protestantism, and they established their mission stations in where there were these Christian groups, and because they thought that they would convert them. So actually, they didn't want these people to migrate to the United States. But when the news about America and the news about this abundance of the jobs that were waiting for these people, they started migrating, and was the letters to their friends that they were doing good here and they were earning money, and they were sending money to their families in Turkey too. So people in Turkey saw that, and then they said, why don't we also migrate and make money, and maybe we with a lot of money. So that's how they started migrating to the United States. So this was the people in the picture. These were the missionaries working in Harput mission station, established by the American missions, which had headquarters in Boston. And this was the picture from the Harput American mission station. So they established schools, hospitals. So it was like not just converting people, to give people education in the American way. And they established also hospitals to provide people, healthcare, etc. So they were doing a lot of job in Eastern Anatolia. And imagine that, many of these people were living in Boston at the time, and then they moved to Eastern Anatolia, which didn't even had roads, didn't have proper houses to stay in. So it was a difficult task, but these people were very determined to serve to God and to disseminate Christianity and Protestantism and American ideas, of course. So this is a picture from Ellis Island again, which was the main immigrant processing station. So these were the Ottoman immigrants. You can see the fezes on their heads. So you can describe that they are coming from the Ottoman Empire at that time. I did most of my research from Ellis Island records, immigration records and census records. So this is one of the immigration records, the ship records actually, where the Turkish immigrants came here. So you can locate them from the names. So it's you can see the Turkish names like Mustafa, Allah verdi, Fura Allah verdi. So this is actually from an immigrant whose grandson that I know. And this is again, maybe have you, I don't know if any of you have been to Ellis Island. You can see all these ship records in that museum if you go there. It's actually closed right now because of the COVID situation. But when it is open, I highly recommend you to go there and see how these people came here for their future, and then they are all these people who made America. As I told you, many of them migrated to Massachusetts area because of the leather industry, and you can see from the picture it was a very hard task to, with a lot of chemicals involved in it. So it was the hardest job in a hard business. So they need, their skin was exposed to lots of chemicals, and they were breathing all these chemicals in their lungs, etc. So it was bad. So they could get all this, lots of germs. For example, when I found their death records, I found that many of them died because of lung cancer, or pneumonia, or tuberculosis. So you can imagine how their life was at that time. Again, a picture from leather industry workers. And some of these immigrants came here, although they wanted to return at some point. Some of the maybe 50% of them stayed because they got married to American wives, to mostly those from the European ancestry. So it was it was not according to their plan. And for example, this Yakub Ahmet, he is the one who came from Harput, from an Eastern Anatolian city, and he migrated to Salem, and he started his life as a leather worker. And then after that, he married to a Canadian French lady, and he decided to stay in here after that, of course. And then he had 3 children, and he was naturalized as an American citizen after serving in the US Army in World War I. So you can see that all these immigrants, also Turkish immigrants, although during World War I, Turkey and the US were not in war, but actually the diplomatic relations were cut off between 1917 and 1927 because America entered war in 1917. And although there was not an actual war, these Turkish immigrants served in the US Army and helped the country. And another interesting thing that I found during my research, that there are that, for example, President Trump was very anti-immigrant. He had a very anti-immigrant rhetoric from the beginning of his presidency, and very anti-Muslim. And many people in the US think that actually Muslims are new contributions to the United States population, but actually it was not. And this mosque, which was established just very close to the in Wall Street area, and very close to the Twin Towers, which were the target of a terrorist attack in September 11. And this mosque was established by the Ottoman government in 1910. And then actual imam, a full-time imam, was sent over here. And he became the imam of the Muslims in New York. And because he first came in 1910 to Washington, D.C., to the embassy, and then they said that there are not enough Muslims in here, let's send you to New York. And then he came to New York, and he established this mosque. And during the Muslim holidays, or on Friday prayers, many of these people, the Muslims, were gathering in here with the imam, and they were celebrating or praying, etc. So this mosque actually is a proof that Muslims are not living here. There is enough population to establish a mosque in the United States. And this is the picture that I showed you before, the Columbia students and the imam who was working like an attaché to the Turkish embassy in Washington, D.C. So he was a very prominent, very educated person. He knew 6 languages, including Chinese, and he worked in China among the Muslims. And after 1910, after the Young Turk Revolution, the government changed, and then they wanted to send him to the United States in order to tell how to make him tell about to the immigrants, to the Muslim immigrants, how to conduct their lives in the United States. And today, you know, it's the 82nd anniversary of the passing away of Atatürk. So I want to tell you that one of these people, you know, I know the families of these students, the Ottoman students of Colombia, and I talked to one of these immigrants, this student's granddaughter today, and because he couldn't go back to Turkey because of the war in 1917, so he stayed in here and became a prominent. Actually, he was in the petroleum business, and he was working in Texas, and he was a very educated person. And when he married in here, he had a daughter. So he established a family in here. So, and when the petroleum surge started in Turkey in like 1936, he was invited to Turkey, and he actually drilled the first petroleum in Turkey in 1940. And all these people that you see in the picture, they went back to Turkey, and then they contributed to the re-establishment, to the establishment of the of their new country, of the Turkish Republic. Again, the Imam, who was sent by the Ottoman government in 1910. And it is about, actually, we found this newspaper article a couple of years ago, and it was very exciting because it was showing that, you know, these Muslims had a place for prayer, a mosque in New York in 1910. This is the newspaper article about how I started my research about searching for the Turkish immigrants. So when I started my research back in like 2003, I got a Fulbright scholarship to do my research at Harvard University. So when I came here in like 2005, and I started digging into the history of the Turkish immigrants, there were actually, you know, all these immigrants had passed away, and their children were very old who stayed in here. So it was very hard to find people to interview and learn more about the Turkish immigrants in here. But after that, you know, I started working in the graveyards, because also graveyards tell us a lot of stories about the diversity of people in here. So this is a graveyard in Peabody, Massachusetts, and the gravestone that you see behind me belongs to Yaqub Ahmet, who changed his name to George Ahmet, and who fought for the U.S. Army during World War I. He was a U.S. veteran, and when he died, he was a Muslim, and his wife was a Christian. So you can see crescent and a star on the one side and the cross on the other side. And they called me a ghost hunter because, you know, I think, you know, there was this Halloween a couple of days ago, and Seydin was very famous for this Halloween stories and ghost stories and the witch hunts, which occurred in the 16th century. And it was, of course, terrible story. But they called me a ghost hunter because I was actually hunting ghosts. There were these people whose stories were never told before. They didn't, you know, many of them were illiterate. They didn't leave anything written behind them. So I was, you know, just hanging around in the graveyards to find some gravestones like this who belonged to the Turkish immigrants. Another view from the graveyard. And you can also see that, you know, back like in 1930s, the Turkish alphabet was changed from the Arabic script to the Latin script. But before then, we were using the Ottoman script, which was like resembling to the Arabic script. So in the graveyards, for example, this gentleman Halid Naman died in 1920. So Turkey was still using the Arabic script. So they found some gravestone makers in order to carve these letters. They actually imitated the letters, but they did a good job. So you can see all this Ottoman script in here, but it is Turkish. Actually, when you read it, it's in Turkish. Again, Yusuf Sharif, born in Turkey and died in 1919. In Peabody, many of the Turkish immigrants who died, like maybe 50–60% of them didn't get married and they didn't have children. So when they died, their friends or the city took care of their bodies. So when I went there, I saw that many of these Turkish immigrants didn't have any gravestones. So this was a little bit sad for me, actually. So with this, here's one of my friends. So he's the prince. He is the director of the graveyard. So I found the records of the Turkish immigrants, and then we started digging into the graves and then finding the numbers. When you dig the graves, there are these numbers of the Turkish immigrants, and you can locate their graves. So, for example, this is one of the records of these Turkish immigrants buried in this graveyard. So I believe that it is, most of these people died because of cancer, because of the chemicals they were exposed to in the leather factories. And Peabody, when I went there, like a couple of months ago, to do a documentary about the leather industry and the Turkish immigrants, the city is still trying to get rid of the waste and the chemicals inside the river, because all the chemicals went into the river, so there were lots of pollution in the river. That's why also they stopped the leather industry in the city, but they are still trying to clean the city, and many of the people actually relocated to other cities because of the pollution in the city. So this was a very sad part of this leather industry. This graveyard actually has another story. This Worcester, Massachusetts, and actually Worcester, Massachusetts is known as a city where Armenian immigrants mainly migrated, and Turkish immigrants in Worcester is not known very well. So when I went there, I was very surprised to see this obelisk, which was put by the Turkish immigrants living in the city, and it belonged to 1918. And and I believe that they needed a graveyard because Muslims are buried differently from the Christians and from the Jews, so they wanted to have a space for their for their friends when they died. So they wanted to have a spot, have a plot in this graveyard, and they had enough numbers. And I believe that why they needed this grave plot in this cemetery. I think it was also the Spanish flu. In 1918 there was the Spanish flu, and it was like the days that we are experiencing today. And there were lots of people dying every day, and there is this resemblance of today. So when I think that also in Worcester there were huge numbers of the Spanish flu cases. So I believe that when they needed a grave spot in order to bury their loved ones in here. And hear me, and here I am in the graveyard, and it was very cold actually in the Boston area. Maybe some of you are from Boston, and it's a very cold climate. So you can see again written gravestones written in Old Ottoman script. And they have like poems on the gravestones, and it's very unusual actually. In Turkey, people don't write poems on the gravestones. It's very untraditional, and it was a very interesting finding for me. And you can see that it says from Elazığ, Ali Ismail, and his real name was Ali Ismail. They changed their names. You can see that in order to to make their lives easier in here. So Joe Hussein, for example, I found his family, and they wanted to put a gravestone on his grave because he didn't have a gravestone. So last year, his family put a gravestone in here, and he was from Eastern Anatolia, and you can see that they put a Turkish flag on, and he was the leader of the Turkish immigrants in Peabody, Massachusetts. And the family wanted me to find people to pray for him, when they put the gravestone. So I called Boston's Turkish embassy, and then they sent an imam and a person, a diplomat from the embassy. So they prayed in here, and it was a very nice thing for the family. And Turkish immigrants also, they established like societies, like the Red Crescent Society, which was like philanthropic societies in here in order to help for their country and for the Turkish immigrants in here. And some of the immigrants, fought for the U.S. Army. And Jamal Hudar, for example, he was a World War I veteran again. So they sacrificed for the U.S., for their adopted country. Again, the passport of one of these Turkish immigrants. Actually, he first worked in the leather industry as a leather worker, and then he became a businessman, and then he was like traveling back and forth between Turkey and the US. So this is his passport, and I found his family. And when he died in the US, he wanted his body to be sent to Turkey to be buried. Many of the Turkish immigrants still, they want to be buried in Turkey. And this is the document of his body to be sent to Turkey. And as I told you, the Turkish immigrants founded some benevolent societies in the US. For example, the graveyard that I showed you belonged to these gentlemen who are from Eastern Anatolians, especially from Elazığ. And they actually raised a lot of money during World War I and the Turkish War for Independence afterwards. So this picture, which belongs to 1923, actually they were raising funding to establish an orphanage for the children in Turkey who lost their dads during World War I and the Turkish War for Independence. So you can see that even, if they were working in here and they were sacrificing their lives in here, they were hardworking people. They still love their country, and they wanted to contribute to their country, to the establishment of the Turkish Republic. So you can see this is from Chicago. So all these people gathered together for the war funding in Turkey. So this first orphanage in Turkey was established with the money that was sent by the Turkish immigrants in the US. So you can see İsmet İnönü and the orphans. He was the second president of Turkey after Atatürk passed away. And this orphanage was still in operation, like I think 2 or 3 years ago. It was closed down, but it was in operation for about like 100 years. And this gentleman, Ali Temur, was the president of the Turkish Red Crescent Society, which was, again, as I told you, was a benevolent society which was established to help the Turkish immigrants in here and help Turkey with the money that they sent. And again, Turkish Red Crescent Society changed its name to Turkish Crescent Association because of the Red Scare in 1940s, 1950s. So they didn't want to be associated with the communists, which was a huge thing at that time. So this Ali Temur, actually, he raised a lot of money during World War II to help to the United States. And there were these war bonds at that time, and he wanted the Turkish business people to buy these war bonds and help the US for the war cause. And he was also in the news for several times. Again, the Turkish Red Crescent Society, which was established in Detroit in 1920s. And they were like, buying stamps for the membership. And last, I want to tell you about William Ali, and he's a Korean War veteran, and he's again a son of one of the Turkish immigrants, Hüseyin Kayma. And when his father migrated in here, he migrated to Detroit to work in the Ford factory, so in the automotive industry, which was huge in 1920s. So many of the Turkish immigrants and Arab immigrants from the Ottoman Empire, they migrated to Detroit in order to work in the automotive industry, because there's this tale that Henry Ford wanted all the immigrants migrate to Detroit and help the automotive industry at that time, and he was paying very good. He said he will pay like $5 a day, and which was a very good amount at that time. And this is his book, Too Young for a Forgettable War. I don't know if you are familiar with the Korean War. It was like after World War II. So actually, Turkey and the US were allies during this war in Korea. And it is also called as a forgotten war, because it was not very, it was not as big as World War II, and it was hidden, it was not covered by the media at the time very well. So that's why it is also it's also called as a forgotten war. So this is the end of my presentation. And I would like to end it with, as you have seen, Turkish immigrants, although they were, I started researching about them because I saw that there was almost nothing about them in the history books, in the survey books about immigration. So I was asking myself why they are not in there. So were they ignored because they were Muslims, because they were Turks, or intentionally, or why they were not in there, although they contributed to the making of the United States, and they were among these people, who made America that we live in today. So I think they needed this, recognition and appreciation. So when I started my research in like 15 years ago, that was the thing in my head. So I was a little bit proud about them, and I wanted to tell their stories, because they were dead when I came here, so they couldn't tell their story. They were just laying in the graveyard. So I thought that I would be their voice, and I should tell their pictures, tell their stories to the Turkish people, to the Turkish immigrants here, so that they can know and they can connect their history to the United States, and they can show that they contributed. They have contributed to the United States, to the economy, and in many ways, like fighting and sacrificing in the wars for over 100 years. So this is why I started my research, and I hope that you have enjoyed my presentation today about these people who I think, I had the honor of being their mouthpiece. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Isil. I think it's a great note to start, and end it. And I think, especially it's just to add up to it, like it's a good time it's an important time to like remember like how important immigrants have been to the fabric of really all countries. Just, and the students know, just recently as well, even with this like Pfizer vaccine, right? It's German, it was Turkish immigrants to Germany that have really have spearheaded this vaccine production. So that, it's just a lot of there's only positives when it comes to in terms of the role of immigrants, and especially in this country, which just is created on. You kind of answered so also, everyone, if you have questions, please put it in the chats. I have and then we'll get to Q&A, but I just have a couple questions myself before we get to Q&A but if you can put them in the chat section, I can kind of order it from there. But you kind of answered one of my questions, Isil, about like what made you want to do this research. But I also, one thing I have to ask, I have a couple of things, but one is like when you were when dealing with it on the Turkish side, one is like, what was, I know you went to, most of them entered, at least in that period, through Ellis Island, but how did they leave Turkey? Like, was it through Istanbul, like, or through Izmir? Like, how was like the main, how did that kind of, did you see kind of similar journeys in terms of how they left?
Exactly, that's a very good question. They actually, some of them just walked to Trabzon, for example, to the Black Sea, to one of the Black Sea ports, like Trabzon or Samsun, and they were on the road for several days. And then when they reached the port, they just got on the ship. They hopped on the ship, and then they took the journey to the United States. And some of them, they didn't have even money for a ticket, so they migrated to Istanbul and worked a couple of years in there, and then earned money in order to get a ticket to the United States. And the journey took like 1 month. It was like a very long journey. Actually, they first came to a European port. It was like the connection flight today. They needed to go to a European port, mostly like Marseille, for example. And then after that, they took another boat, another ship to reach New York shores. And there are like also stories, like, for example, some companies who had bad intentions about these immigrants. When they reached Marseille, they said, okay, we reached the United States, so you can get off. And after like 2 or 3 days, they would find that they were not in the United States, and they could not come to the US or go back to Turkey. So they had a difficult time. And these people were mostly like between the ages of 15 to 25. They were like adventurous. They didn't know how far America is when they got on the ship. So it was very they were courageous and they were adventurous.
Yeah, I think that what's interesting, you mentioned that kind of like, unfortunately, this illegal kind of shady smuggler routes, and that sounds like it's, we keep talking about that now, but it's been happening, at least especially through the Mediterranean. That's interesting. And so also, I mean, I think just I had this on my notes. I think you, it should be noted in terms of at least Turkish history about last names weren't actually wasn't really a thing until the third.
Exactly.
So I think I'm sure that made your life harder. I mean, I don't know if you want to talk about the soil de kanunu, like just kind of how, how, I mean, how did that, I mean, that difficulty, I think that would be interesting for them to know about the Turkish history about that.
Yeah, maybe it'll be good to mention, because perhaps people in there, they don't know, maybe we didn't have any last name before the last name, how do you call it, law, or
yeah right. Yeah, it was a law. Yeah, we had, I mean, I'm not sure how the law, I don't know, but I guess that was just a title that was just, easy when it comes to English, the English history. But I think with the Ottoman times, you didn't have surnames, but they had to. But then they made the law to register in 1934 to finally have surnames. So like most of your research was before that too. So
exactly, it's very hard. As you have seen on the gravestones, their names were most like Ali, Hussein, Osman, Hassan. So there were like thousands of Ali, thousands of Mehmet, thousands of Osman. So you don't know who is who without the last name. So that made my also research very difficult to trace them. I cannot trace them. If I find the family, I can trace them, but other than that, it's very hard to find the Turkish immigrants and where, how many numbers. For example, I believe that it's like 50,000 Kurdish, Turkish immigrants migrated to the United States, but it is very hard to calculate the real numbers.
And my last question before, and then we can take it to Q&A. Again, make sure you write your questions on the chat. But if through your research, like, has there been what's the most similar kind of immigration pattern you can that the Ottoman and the Turkish migration relates to? I mean, have you been able to do some sort of comparative analysis with other countries like that, and just like these, you're like, okay, this one seems very similar to, like, even if it's like the time periods, or just like the manner in which, or like the economy, the sectors that they focused on when they got here. Yeah, I mean, have you seen what's similarities, very much differences like that?
You mean immigrants from the other countries?
Yeah.
Mostly, I compare them to the Italian immigrants. Actually, when they came here, also Greek immigrants, Greeks both from Anatolia, from Turkey, and Greeks from Greece. When they came here, you can see that they established, for example, like coffee houses on the streets. And one of the streets in Peabody, Massachusetts, was called Ottoman Street, because of the Greeks and Turks establishing all their shops and coffee houses on that street. So I was also doing research among the newspaper articles, and I found many like Greeks, Turks, Italians. They were hanging around together because their culture are almost the same. And with the Greeks, of course, it's very similar, like the coffee house culture, and many of them came single men in here, although they were married. Back, like 50% of these immigrants were married. They left their wives and their children, so they were like just men in here. So it was a very similar pattern. Actually, like Italian immigrants, they are very, of course, they are maybe one of the most famous immigrants in the US because of all these Hollywood films. 50% of the almost 50% of the Italian immigrants, they returned to Italy after coming in here. And there were these lots of discussions about the Columbus statues, and they, some people wanted them to be removed. But actually, the people who erected these statues were the Italians, because they were considered as blacks when they came to the United States. They were lynched, for example, in New Orleans. They were killed. They were lynched and killed because they were thought, they were considered as blacks, and they were there was a high racism in that case. So they, with like building and with putting the Columbus statues beginning by like 1900s, they wanted to show that they were also white people. So they whitened themselves through the Columbus statues.
Yeah, I keep forgetting Columbus was actually Italian.
Yeah, exactly.
Did it? I know we have kind of shortened time, but but does anyone have like some urgent questions or that you'd like to ask? I don't see anything in the chat, but I'll give people a couple minutes to think about it. I guess while there might be a question, I mean, like what was the most kind of oddest life story you heard through like, I mean, through your research? I mean, I'm sure you kind of went through so much genealogy, but is there I know you mentioned the ones that kind of stick out with the it just kind of blew your mind about. Oh, you went so yeah, so you're muted for some reason. I go.
Okay. I don't recall any, story like this, but I think one of the like maybe funny, maybe sad part of these immigrants are that as I told you, they were all men, and then when they came here, some of them got married to the American wives. And although they were married, some of these people were married in Turkey. They had kids, they had a wife. And then when they came here, they married again. So they raised two families without these families knowing each other. So for example, some people are reaching out to me, and then they say that, oh, I found a family member of me in the US. So can you connect us, etc. So it's like, people are still finding family members in here, because they, although some of them went back to Turkey, although they were married in here, and that they never told about their lives in here. So it's like, we didn't have any social media at the time, so they took advantage of this communication.
No more, these daytime shows like Maury and Jerry Springer, so no like paternity test.
Exactly. Definitely. One of them I thought that wanted to get married in here, and when it was found out that he was already married, and then he said, oh, I thought that my wife died, so so that's why I'm getting married in here.
Yeah, I mean, that's very fascinating. Yeah, I mean, I think like just to give a comparative, it's just like, even with because my dad's African American, and so we, it's one of my cousins has been doing genealogy, but of course, it's hard when you're descendant of slaves, and then like there is that kind of like there's at some point there possibly like a plantation owner has had a separate affair or life or family, right? And so that's kind of where we're at. But it's just like, but he's been able to find the other, even though we're from like Arkansas, Louisiana, we have like family in Tennessee. And so, he was able to trace it up to the white side of it. And so, yeah, I mean, genealogy is very fascinating, and gives you, I'm sure, many stories, and I can't wait for your own like autobiography at some point when it comes to this research. But yeah, did you have any more? Yeah, if you had any concluding remarks, Isil, I think we can close it after that. I think we probably answered a lot of the questions that people already had. So
I think I'm okay. I'm good.
well, thank you, Isil. Like I
But
think
thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure to be with you.
thank you for this opportunity. And I hope, that gave everyone a good, like, kind of history lesson and just kind of insight into how, what kind of footprint, and especially Turks have had in the U.S. that I don't think people have seen before. So I want to thank you again for taking the time and talking to everyone. And if if people have questions afterwards, you can email me or Demet about it, and we can forward it along to you. Like I said, we're recording this at least for the people that weren't able to make it, but I think most of them were here today. But just in case after they hear the recording, if they have any questions, I can email them to you later. But thank you again, Isil, and yeah, I guess.
Thank you for this.
It's almost coming up. Happy holidays, I should say. And so take care. And
you too. Thanks
thank
so
you.
much, Cenk. Thank you. Bye, everybody.
Take care, everyone. And we'll talk later about the events that are coming up on Friday. I think we'll close it off here.
Okay.